hope you enjoyed Christos's inaugural professorship lecture. We're about to enter part 2 of this evening, and my job is to introduce Dr. Shaun Borstrock. Before I do, I'll just say that I'm Tracy Cockerton-Tattersall. I'm Director for Teaching and Learning, and I work very closely with Shaun as Head of Knowledge Exchange and Research, and we've probably worked together about 2.5 years now, and I have to say he's been an absolute brick when it comes to having someone to work with in the roles that we have within the institution, across the institution. So it's a very delightful moment here for me to introduce Shaun, and obviously for this evening to allow him to provide you with an account of his journey through his work to attain his professorship. So just to say, Shaun is, as I say, Head of Knowledge Exchange and Research and Professor of Luxury and Consumer Culture. He is an internationally respected expert in design-led innovation, luxury branding, and creative collaboration. As our head of knowledge exchange and research, he also champions the idea that design should lead and not follow business strategy. His work promotes the role of design as a powerful force in shaping decision-making and driving change. With over 20 years' experience in the creative industries, Shaun brings deep insight into how design, craftsmanship, and technology come together to shape the future of luxury and consumer experience. But I'll leave Shaun to tell you more.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Tracy. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'll start by saying, I think it were we together when we went to New York and we were going through customs, and the guy at the customs desk said to me, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a professor." And he said, "Professor of what?" I said, "Luxury." And he said, "Is there such a thing?" Anyway, so this is not dissimilar to Christos's talk. It's kind of a history of me, really, and how I got from where I was. Let me just check time so I don't keep you for too long. Got from where I was to where I am. So I started thinking about luxury more recently. It wasn't kind of in my vocabulary growing up. We traveled quite a lot around the world. And my mother had fashion shops. My father had a leather factory, kind of, I think. And we moved around quite a bit. But we were in Belgium, and it was in Belgium when I remember going to Yves Saint Laurent with my parents. And my mother bought a handbag, which she's never used, and she still has, and a dress. And I think I got a corduroy blazer with patches, and my father got shirts and ties and things. And I was struck then by how important that kind of environment was, not just for shopping, but really for buying quality product. And looking back, I think that set the tone, because even though Yves Saint Laurent wasn't kind of the thing for me, I became much more interested in Versace, which was near where we lived on Avenue Louise, but I was much more into Fiorucci and spent more time on a Saturday in Fiorucci than I did anywhere else. But looking back on it and thinking about this luxury business that it's become, and questioning it and why people buy things and buy so much stuff that they don't really need. And you think luxury is a thing. It's a $300 billion business where we are not actually sold a product, we're sold a name, a logo. And they talk about branding, and branding is, for me, it's really meaningless. Because it doesn't actually say anything about anything. It's just a logo. It doesn't instill a sense of quality in a product. It just tells you that you are buying a label. So this journey kind of started in the 80s. I'm pleased that Christos at least went back to the 80s. Well, I think he went back to 1978. So that's kind of a blessing. I'm not going back that long. But I was at school and was really interested in making stuff. And when I was still at school, I did a part-time course at the Cape Town School of Fashion, doing it on the Saturdays, learning how to make things, learning how to cut patterns. And I was then even obsessed with fabrics and with textiles. And in fact, this was, I still to this day don't even remember how this happened. This was a fashion show I did it was called the Women's Wear Fair in Cape Town. I happened to produce a collection. I still don't know how it happened, but the star of that show was Nolan Miller, who did the costumes for Dallas and Dynasty. So that was my first foray into kind of design and into fashion. Making stuff, having learned on the weekend how to make stuff and show it. I then left Cape Town. Well, no, I stayed in Cape Town. I went to the University of Cape Town. And I did 1 year of graphic design. And I was speaking to a friend that was in the class with me, and we were so distraught by what an awful experience it was that we both left. She left later than me, but I came to London and I went to St. Martin's and then got a job at Loewe. And Loewe is very different to what it was. It was very much about the quality of the product, around the service that you gave, the leathers that they used. And interestingly, and I told the story to Mark yesterday, and he said, sure, I don't know if you should be telling the story, but Peter Ustinov came in and he asked us to make a coat from hamster pelts for his wife. And at that time, you just kind of did what you did. And thankfully it was for his wife, because had it been for him, the 2,000 skins would have become 4,000 skins. But what struck me was not necessarily these poor little hamsters, and the skins are literally that big, but was the craftsmanship that went into making this coat. And that has always stuck with me, is that the level of expertise and skill that you need to make something like that is phenomenal. I then went to work with the Emanuels, and specifically, more with David Emanuel, and I was head of production. The studio was on Brook Street, and the workshop was in Maddox Mews. And I've always been inspired by David's attention to detail. So it was more Elizabeth making the frou-frou stuff than David. David was much more kind of slimline and trim, but fixated on quality and cut and fabric. And it didn't really matter who the client was, whether it was Joan Collins or Elizabeth Taylor. The detail that he was like an architect of fashion, whether it was drapery or tailoring, and still is, immaculate. And that has always stayed with me. So I guess the journey I've had in luxury, even though it wasn't luxury, was always around attention to detail. I then, went back to Cape Town. And again, not really sure how this all happened, but I set up a studio in Cape Town and started making things. I think it started because I was making a wedding dress for a friend of mine. She said, because I'd come back from London, she said, "Oh, can you make my wedding dress?" So that's how that all started. And then I set up a studio. It was amazing. I had these amazing women working with me, and everything that we did was around kind of handwork. All the hems were stitched by hand. If it was chiffon, it was hand rolled. It wasn't kind of using a foot. And we did a lot of work with beading and embroidery. They were Portuguese, the ladies, so their embroidery skills were phenomenal. And just focusing really on making. And I suppose, like Christos, I became a bit of a celebrity in South Africa, and I had the opportunity to license my name out. And I did that with a company in Johannesburg, so I was kind of flying between Johannesburg and Cape Town, and we were making collections that were sold around Africa. And I was also a sponsor for Miss South Africa. And we sponsored, the company, we sponsored the daywear, so I dressed Miss South Africa for the year. But what was extraordinary about that was firstly the televised event that had a Boeing 747 wheeled onto the stage at Sun City, and the contestants walked, this is how ridiculous things were in the 80s, and contestants walked down the stairs But more ridiculous is that a friend of mine, Kevin Friedman, who was a jeweler, said to me, do you want some jewelry? And I said, yeah, sure. And he said, okay, what would you like? So I said, oh, what can we have? He said, whatever you want. So we made gold, diamond, and diamond tassels that hang off the jackets, and kind of beading and all this stuff, which was made from gold and diamonds and emeralds and sapphires. And what struck me about those days was he was, like me, so fixated on the quality of the make. And I suppose the emphasis of this whole kind of talk is me being, firstly, very impatient, but secondly, fixated on quality. And it doesn't matter, people who know me, if you go to a restaurant, it's guaranteed I'm going to send the food back because it's either cold or it's overcooked. Because I believe, you're paying for something, you should get what you're paying for. So that journey was amazing. With my mother was doing work for charity. Well, we set up Fashion Against Child Abuse, raising money for a childcare centre on the outskirts of Cape Town, and then it was just lots and lots and lots of press. I mean, this is not even half. I've got 287 tear sheets that I found that I've kept for some reason, and I had hair in the day, but I also had the opportunity, and this is something even more ridiculous, to do costumes for a musical, an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, and I got top billing over, one of the most famous composers in the world. And there was a review of the musical that was called Music of the Night, and the reviewer said Shaun Borstrock is undoubtedly a mover and shaker in the fashion world, but costuming is not his forte. So that was the end of my costuming career. Never did another show. So then as I said, I'm impatient. I got bored and I left Cape Town, and I kind of packed it all in because I just didn't want to make clothes anymore. But I came to London and I did do 4 collections. And again, this opportunity was slightly different because I had access to the couture houses, the couture textile factories or producers in Paris and in Italy, and I worked with factories that produced for Ferragamo and for Missoni. We had guipure that was woven for us, which was phenomenal because again it's this attention to detail that I was so fixated with. And I just started at that point thinking, well, in the late 80s, we had the first designer jeans, Gloria Vanderbilt and Jordache, and that was the thing. And it was all designer. There wasn't luxury. There wasn't a luxury brand. It was all really about the designers. Armani wasn't a luxury brand. And I started thinking about that. And in the interim, I was approached by, and I don't even remember who it was. I mean, Claire might know, but somebody at London College of Fashion said to me, oh, would you be interested in teaching? And I said, yeah, sure. So I went for an interview with Alison Shreve, and Alison said to me, can you teach marketing? And I said, have you taught before? And I said, no. And she said, but could you teach marketing? And I said, sure. She said, well, the lesson will be next week. Great. So I went in and I taught my first lesson at St Martin's and at London College of Fashion on the BA Fashion Studies. And 2 weeks after that, Alison said, well, I don't want to do the course director job anymore. Do you want to do it? So I said, well, yeah, sure. So I ended up being the course director of BA Fashion Studies, having never worked in education before, which was amazing. I've worked, it was an amazing experience working with some of the most amazing people. And that is what I think has kept me in education. The opportunity to be inspired by students, be inspired by staff, and collaboration. And what that then did was it kind of propelled me into thinking much more about stuff and people and why people would spend ridiculous amounts of money on stuff that they don't really need. I then was then on a validation in Utrecht, and I got into the lift and I met this woman called Judy Glassman. And she said, oh, what do you do? So I said, I'm working at London College of Fashion. And she said, oh, would you be interested in a job? So I said, well, not really, because I'm working at LCF. And she said, well, we've got a professor of fashion job that's going, let's have a conversation. So had a conversation when we got back to England, and I went for the interview, and she said, well, we don't think you're suitable for that professor of fashion job, but would you like to be the associate head of school? I don't know actually how all this has happened. But anyway, it seems all like really odd. Would you like to be the associate head of school and head of design? And I said, sure. So what that did is it exposed me to a completely different world of design and thinking, because we had industrial design and we had product design, fashion, interiors, graphics, illustration. And Judy was phenomenal and an inspiration, because she never actually said no to anything. So we started working with industry in a way that I don't think many universities had done, because everything was based on the work we did with industry. And we had, for their validation panels, we had industry partners coming in, working with us on validating the degrees, and then working with those students. But importantly, it was international. So we worked in Japan, we worked in South Africa, and we worked all around the world, including setting up franchises in Malaysia and in Russia. And it was inspirational, because the learning, cultural influence and social understanding is so important when you're talking about design and communication, which is what you do when you design stuff. I then had a bet with somebody about doing a PhD, because they said, well, you finished your PhD, you finished your MA, you'll never do a PhD. And I said, fine, we'll have a bet. And that's why I started doing a PhD, not really because I wanted to do a PhD. And it was kind of a follow-on from my In Pursuit of Luxury journey, which is what was the title of my thesis for my MA. And that's, kind of where this bigger question came around, what luxury is. If everything is luxury, so you can go and buy a luxury pillowcase at Primark, but you can also go and buy a couture dress at Chanel, and they're both luxury. If everything's luxury, is anything luxury? And that's the question I still ask myself today. And it's a question that nobody really answers, because you can't answer it. And within the context of my work, I don't think luxury is about price, but I think it's much more about the person, it's about the touch of hand, it's about the craftsmanship, the materials, and that has led me to, writing. And I just put that up there because I found an article that said I was voted in the top 20 most powerful people in African fashion about 4 years ago. But yeah, anyway, so that, I don't even know why that's there, but I thought it was quite funny. But in 2003, I wrote an article. So amongst all of this stuff, I was also writing. And I wrote an article for Graphic Magazine in 2003, and I was asking exactly the same question then that I'm asking today, is why are people buying all this stuff? Why are they spending so much money on stuff that they don't really need? So I've written for journals, I've written for books, I've written a book with Mark, Veronica Mando and Sylvia Carter, written for The Conversation, all really, questioning this idea of buying. And in between all of this, I worked as the director of luxury research for RJHPR, which was Sophie Wessex's company, the Duchess, she's now Duchess of Edinburgh, and we worked on projects with the Grove and Fortnum and Mason. I was also director of luxury research for what was then the British Luxury Council, which no longer exists. And then I don't know how that happened either, but I got a gig as managing director for Cabbages and Roses. So all very, very different. When you're looking at Fortnum's and Cabbages and Roses, I mean, they're miles apart. And I mean, all of this, I suppose, has given me a really different overview and insight into kind of the world of work and design. But through all of this, the most important thing to me is around collaboration and working with other people on projects. And it's been phenomenal, amazing opportunities to do some amazing projects with amazing people around the world. We set up a foundation in South Africa called the Foundation for the Creative Industries, where we worked with women in the township, upskilling them, teaching them how to knit. We brought students to London. In fact, one of them worked with Gemma when Gemma was at Karen Millen, giving them the opportunity to be exposed to the fashion industries in London. We've done amazing projects with the British Council, international projects, one around the Creative Entrepreneurs Challenge, one around digital printing. The book project was with Sheena, Mark and I, which was an exhibit as part of the 10th anniversary of the AHRC at CSM. So lots of these things I have no idea how to do, but working with amazing people who do know how to do is what's inspiring and kind of motivates me to keep going through my impatience. Brilliant projects with Yale, Prada and the Politecnico in Milan, where we looked at the future of retail, working at the Prada Foundation. We took 40 students there who kind of had a brilliant opportunity to work with them. And then also, as in Pursuit of Luxury with Yale, we did a project in Cape Town called Designers, Utility, Luxury, Sustainability and Waste, looking specifically at the water shortage in Cape Town. That was about, I think Jessica sent me a message the other day, 6 years ago. And luxury not being about a project, but luxury being about kind of the ability to survive through a water crisis. And then other projects in Japan, that one with Harris Tweed, which was, Mark and I went to Japan, and it was sponsored, paid for by the Daiwa Foundation, looking at kind of tradition that came from the Harris Tweed Hebrides collection of fabrics and the traditions of Japanese making. And that was, I think, 18 months ago. Moving swiftly on to this idea about collaboration. So I also had a design exchange partnership with the Design Museum Future Observatory, and that project, I focus specifically on students who have the opportunity to design a product using Harris Tweed to avoid, excess cloth going into landfill. This is me showing off a bit. I've worked with loads of companies in all different kind of spaces, whether it's, I mean, you can see who they all are. Some of them, not all of them. But just because I'm interested, I'm inquisitive, and I believe that, doing things together is the best way of working. It's not about, projects are not about one person. It's about collaboration and understanding different people's ways of working. So that's led me to working with some brilliant universities around the world and colleges. Many of them we still work with, or I still work with in one way or the other. And it provides, again, opportunities for not only for me, but people I work with, and for them to exchange, knowledge. And that's kind of real knowledge exchange. So the luxury thing. I had a conversation with a cousin of mine who lives in Australia, and we were talking about technology and luxury. And he said to me, but just because something's mass-produced, it doesn't mean it's not luxury. And I said, well, because it's mass-produced, it isn't luxury. I don't believe you can mass-produce luxury in that way. But then Iris van Harpen, the designer, came up with all this stuff that was 3D printed. And I think at the time, I was saying to Mark that Mark Bloomfield, who's a visiting professor here, you can't wear any of that stuff. It was all amazing and sculpture, but you can't sit down, you can't stand up. It was just this 3D printed stuff. And I think Mark had just won the World 3D Print Prize. And I said to him, what about making a textile that was like a textile, 3D printing a textile? So as brilliant as he is, he came up with ModeClicks. What that did for me was it combined this notion of technology and traditional making in a way that I would have never imagined. So these are pieces that I made on a stand or on a body. What's amazing about all of this is that I think this dress is now a cushion cover. I don't know what's happened to that. That still exists, but it's all, they're interlinked pieces of laser sintered nylon that come apart and go back together again. So you could that dress could be 45 feet long. It could compete with the Emmanuel's wedding dress. But what was amazing, you could dye the colors, you could take it apart, put it back together again, and that instilled in me a different understanding of the merging of technology and traditional making. And that was, I mean, that took us on a completely different journey. We made films that were nominated for fashion awards at fashion film festivals. We've published highly cited papers, which in fact Mark wrote. I didn't, but my name's on it, so I still get the credit, so that's good. We worked on the Mark got a Worth Partnership Award. And we were shortlisted for the H&M Global Change Awards. So it's been an amazing journey into what I knew very little about, which was 3D printing, but also how to work together and perhaps redefine what luxury might be. But for me, you know, I keep going back to it. It's always by the hand. It's all about the hand. So the In Pursuit of Luxury thing, we've gone from, you know, the late 1980s, being at school, buying clothes at Yves Saint Laurent, not really kind of understanding this idea of luxury because it never entered the vocabulary, but this pursuit of luxury, which was obviously kind of ingrained in me in one way or the other, because I've always been fixated with this idea of craftsmanship, and my mission within Pursuit of Luxury is really to better understand that value. So, as I said, we've had a book. I'm editor of Luxury Studies, the In Pursuit of Luxury Journal, which I founded with Intellect, and I have another book. It's not coming out this year, called Technology and the Luxury Market, Innovation, Design and the Consumer Experience. And that's really focusing on honesty, honest production, honest consumption, and an honest supply chain. So it leads me to this notion of collaboration and understanding, conversations with some of the most amazing people on the podcast that we, I think, set up 3 years ago. We've got, 70 episodes in, 11 seasons, but with some of the most inspirational guests that you could imagine. Theo Fennell, I met in a bar, in Jimmy's bar. I don't know if any of you have been to Monte Carlo, but I met him on a drunken evening at Jimmy's bar in Monte Carlo, and we've become, good friends. But the thing with Theo that has always stuck with me is his attention to detail, and everything for me, as I keep saying, is about attention to detail. The annoying interview I had with Zandra Rhodes was because I was asking her about Studio 54, and she wouldn't disclose anything. So that was slightly frustrating because she's obviously got stories to tell. But amazing, speaking to actors, speaking to designers, speaking to fashion editors, jewelers. Mark Sainsbury owns a wine farm, and just getting an understanding of their passion for what they do, because they're all absolutely passionate about what they do. And that is instilled, I think, in me through the conversations that we've had. So, the starting point is nobody really knows what luxury is. I mean, I have a view, and I'll argue it from here to wherever and back. It doesn't mean that I'm right, but I think it's important that what we do is we focus on this preservation of skills and craftsmanship. Gemma has a blog called Elephant in the Wardrobe, and constantly telling us that there are 70 million pieces of clothing or stuff on Vinted. Zara. Yeah. We don't need all that stuff. We don't need to constantly push stuff into landfill that, I don't have kids, but for all everybody who does have kids, we're leaving the world in such a mess where if you buy something that is better, that is crafted, it has an element of quality, that has the touch of the hand, where you can appreciate the person who's making it, and you're buying less because you are buying better. And it's not about the money. You could be whittling a spoon, and that's a luxury spoon. You could be buying a spoon that's made from 18-karat gold, and that's an amazing spoon. But it's really, for me, it's about the preservation of skills and craftsmanship that kind of is this pursuit of luxury that I'm pursuing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your sharing your story regarding fashions. I have one question related to 3D print. Can we, like 3D printed clothes,
Yeah.
can we wear it on daily basis, or
Yeah.
does it create any impact on health or environment?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a good question. So with that particular textile, I mean, it's laser sintered, so you're using a very fine powder which is fused together. It's not really recyclable, but what it is that you can recycle the product. So environmentally, it will probably stay in the ground forever, won't it, Mark? Yeah, but I mean, the thing is that it's fully customizable, so you can take it apart, put it back together. So that the livelihood of that is extended in for as long as you want it to extend. As with regard to the health aspect, I have no idea. Once it's fused, but I think if you were sniffing the powder, it wouldn't be good for you. But well, that came out really wrong. But if you were just wearing it, I don't know what the health implications are. But you can, you wouldn't put it in landfill because you're recycling it and reusing it. So a long dress, you can make a short dress you can turn into a cushion cover. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
I am by background a linguist. I like languages.
Yeah.
What I would have liked you to do, to actually insist on taking the word luxury from the dictionary and say the quintessence of what it is this, whether you call it design or hand or whatever.
Yeah.
That would have been a triumph.
But the definition of luxury in the dictionary makes no sense at all.
What does it say?
It's anything in excess of what you need.
I'm just actually working with a luxury, Luxus in,
Yes.
in German, Lux in French. It must comes from Latin. But
Yeah,
to be honest,
it does.
I mean, the people, whether it is the lady who puts the dress or whatever, are
Yeah.
mad about the word luxury, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, and all the rest of it. And from your point of view, you are the artist, you are the creator, is say, actually, this is what it is. And you always, kind of used some synonym, craft, design,
Yeah.
hand, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's
Yeah.
my idea.
No, interesting. I mean, you're absolutely right. But I mean, if you go back to Plato, their definitions of luxus and the vice and the virtue of luxury. So, you can go then to Veblen in the 18th century and talk about the same things, vice and virtue. It's somebody's vice or somebody's virtue.
I just want to ask a simple one question. Do you believe luck?
Do I believe in luck? Oh, I don't know. Maybe. Why? Do you think I've been lucky?
Now that's why I said, you create luck or luck create you? That's my question.
Oh. Well, hopefully I create luck. Yeah. Hopefully I create it. Because I like to think that the people that I'm working with, we're all lucky. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, because the way you actually explain, like every time somebody touches you, every job, and also it's a really personal. I think this is a real lesson for humans.
Oh, thank you, Daba.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.
I have a difficult question for you.
Oh, yeah.
Just kidding. So I think in our fields, in branding and marketing, there is a huge misunderstanding. This misunderstanding is based on the fact that usually people talk about user needs, okay? But all of this, in my opinion, is not about needs, it's about desire.
Yeah.
Which is completely different. Now, desire is a fantastic word from Latin again. So it literally is decidus, which means distance from the stars. And luxury is a something in common with this root. because as the person who talked before me said, it's about the light. So my question for you is, in your opinion, which is the next dimension of desire in future, in the next years? What do you think?
That's a difficult question. So it's interesting because in my first slide I had desire and I took it out. I don't know. In the future, what will it be?
Yeah, in this we are.
It goes back to what I was saying about this kind of preservation. We are seeing some downturn in the desire of stuff. They're definitely, champions of the world who definitely believe in, and the reduction of plastics, the reduction of mass-produced stuff. You walk. I was walking through my favourite shop, Marks and Spencer's, the other day, Tracy, and what struck me is that on one rail, I think there were 40 jackets, and you're thinking that's one shop with 40 jackets. And that's not the stock room. That's just on the shop floor. You go into Dior, and they might have less, but they've still got 20 blouses. And then you think, so in Marks and Spencer they might be using cotton. In Dior they might be using silk, which is even worse than using cotton. The poor silkworms that are boiled to get the silk. But it's all about, very much about encouraging. Those places are very much about encouraging consumption. But I think people are starting to realize that they don't need to continually buy stuff because there's so many champions of the preservation of what you have or repurposing what you have. And I think that's a desire, the desire to make things better and to, I suppose, live better than constantly buying new stuff.
Thank you for such an interesting, you've had such an amazing, inspirational life story. Gosh, I had no idea. Shaun. Amazing. Sorry, that's not what I was going to say, but I felt like I had to say that. You've achieved obviously so much. You've done like design, research, you write. Is there anything, what do you want to do next, right? Is there a field, obviously you don't need to do anything else, but is there anything else that you're thinking, yeah, that's my next big project? Because I can see you have that amazing energy where you're like, I want to do something new, I want to do something new. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I mean, Justine said to me the other day, stop doing more things. But yeah, if it was something, it would be something completely different. It would probably be elephant conservation in Thailand. Because I think, I love, seeing people make things, and I'm inspired by craftsmanship. But I definitely want people to stop buying stuff because it has a label on it. This notion of branding, like I said earlier, it's not a stamp of quality. It's just a stamp of ownership. And I think that's kind of a thing I want to follow, is to try and get people to stop believing that buying a polyvinyl propylene bag from Louis Vuitton is worth £800 or a bag that's £10,000 from Chanel. I just saw the other day that new Chanel, the white Chanel shirts are £4,000. It's like, who in their right mind spends £4,000 on the shirt? But there are millions of billionaires and millionaires who would do that. But it's not because you're buying a great quality shirt. So I think that route about, trying to discourage people from buying so much stuff is that and elephants.
Thank you.
I'm actually one of Chris's ex-students, but I found this quite interesting just by accident. But
okay. Cool.
Did you find on your travels to Japan that there was maybe an increased appreciation for craftsmanship versus anywhere else in the world? I don't know if there's like a fetishization of that, or if it is a reality there.
Yeah, I mean, Japan is definitely my favorite place in the world. And I think there is, it doesn't matter where you go in Japan, there's a pride with everything. So you will go into a cake shop or into a department store and they will spend 15 minutes wrapping the package. You can go to a knife maker and they will spend weeks kind of, hammering the steel to get the knife. The same with, the guys who are weaving kimonos. but the issue, unfortunately, in Japan is that a lot of these craft skills are dying because their population is shrinking. It's much older. Younger people aren't really interested in it. It's the same as here, all around the world. Young people aren't necessarily interested in doing that stuff. But I think there's definitely a very different sensibility around honoring people who make things and do things. So it's not only about the physical product, it's definitely also about service. If you go on a bullet train in Japan and it says it's leaving at 7:03, and you're not there at 7:03, the train's gone. But what's also amazing about that is that there are ladies who, I don't know where they sit on the train, but they come out in immaculate pink uniforms, they stand on the platform, do everything, clean it, and you're on the train and you're gone within like 30 seconds. It's that attention to detail, I think, that distinguishes Japanese culture from anywhere else in the world. I mean, it's not dissimilar in Korea, but yeah, I mean, Japan is inspirational on all sorts of levels for me.
Thank you, Shaun, for an interesting talk. And I was thinking, who is the arbiter of the luxury? If it's in the museum, you could say, okay, it made it there because of a merit, or it's in a top-notch fashion magazine. But could you say that every individual person makes their own judgment on luxury? And sometimes you have very bad taste and people still love it, and it might have a logo.
Yeah, I that's also an interesting question. I think people believe what they want to believe. They believe what we as marketers tell them. You can make anybody believe anything, I think. And yeah, I think, luxury is in the eye of the beholder. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with it, because like I said, it could be a pillow slip from Primark that's luxury. It might be luxury to somebody, but within the context of the work that I'm doing and my research, it definitely isn't luxury, because I'm looking through a very specific lens, which is not about just making something luxury, because the word adds value, and that's how people attribute it to the product, is that the word is what the value is, and they're ignoring the product. But you're right. I mean, many people have bad taste and enjoy many luxuries, they might say. But yeah.
Thank you very much for this evening. It's been brilliant, actually. It's been really interesting to sort of watch your journey through and your pursuit of luxury. So my question's slightly cheeky, actually. In your pursuit of luxury, what is the most luxurious thing that you own?
Right. That's your question on the podcast, Gemma. You see, so I don't, it's odd, because it used to be things, it's not anymore. The most luxurious thing I own, you see, I don't think of anything that I own as being luxurious. I might have years ago, but because I suppose I don't hold things as valuable anymore for me. They might be valuable because it might be made in gold, but I don't. My luxury is more about the space I'm inhabiting, I think, and the people I'm with. And the information that I'm kind of siphoning off everybody else. It's not really about a thing. Though there would be one thing, actually, is clean linen every day. Clean bed linen. That would be my thing.
Cool, thanks very much. I just want to ask, what do you think why people like clothes? Why do we like... I think we need to go deep in psychology, for example, and different countries, maybe they have different perception of I think comes from balance of because we come symmetrical, so we like balance in life, People don't like graffiti because that's a little bit not as balanced as we live in room which is balanced well, Also when we see paintings, for example, photographs, we all try to balance things. So I think the luxury comes from personal how it's not like people have their own, I think, judgments or something, but I think that's what is natural to us, no? Is it to look good? Otherwise, it looks a little bit too not so balanced to us.
Yeah, I wish it was that simple, because I think that we've been bombarded with so much information. It's just all this sound that is confusing. You know, it just confuses us as to what something may or may not be. We are told that you need to dress like this or you need to dress like that. I was going to wear a suit today, and I was told, well, do you want to look like a guy wearing a suit? You know, it's all conditioning, and I think we're conditioned in different ways by different people. And what these messages, a lot of subliminal messaging that's coming to us, telling us how to dress. Somebody might say, oh, you look quite nice. Somebody might think, God, what is he wearing? Do you know what I mean? So it's all, I think that kind of stuff is personal, but I think fashion is a monster. And it's turned us all into monsters because we always want something new, and it's the same with gaming, as you know, it's the same with technology, it's the same with many things, is that, you know, how much more stuff do you need? You know, do you need to have a new phone every 6 months? Do you need to have a new PlayStation or Xbox or whatever it might be? And I think it's just economies thrive on us spending money. That's the way of the world.
I mean, I think it's cultural, so it's sometimes it's not personal, it's cultural, but also where you live here. But for example, it's like what you're wearing today, so it's also practical, because you have a blazer, because outside is maybe it was summer, you would have something else, So you think it's luxury? I mean a little bit, because it would be a little bit warmer, maybe like some, so maybe it's kind of
I really only dress like this for work. When I'm not at work, I don't normally dress like this.
But do you think about, that's a good question. Do you think about luxury when you're at home? When you look at in the mirror, like, I want to look good to myself.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But now I want to look good for you. So hopefully this is kind of, I've made an effort. So, okay, Sheena, and then I think, and then I think
I'll give you a call. We'll discuss everything else. I'm not going to say right now. So first of all, your mother says you should have taken a picture of the bag. Yeah.
Right.
She had.
Right.
I've just realised, because when I first met you 21 years ago, I thought you genuinely liked luxury.
Right.
And you've been annoying me with this question for 21 years. Everywhere I go and I see some luxury thing, I'm like, I don't care about luxury. My working class hackles come out, as you know, and I'm like, get away from me, But you've made me think about this thing for all these years. So compliment for the fact that I've never had a boring conversation with you about it. So fantastic for that. I've just suddenly realised I'm actually asking you a question here. I don't think your work is about luxury at all. I think it's about value in us, in ourselves, and about how we are in the world that's mediated by objects, consumer culture. I think the second part of your professorial thing is really the thing, which is how are we in the world through how do we know ourselves? And then I don't care about luxury branding. I have never willingly bought a luxury product in my life. Maybe a luxury Tesco's meal, that's about it. But so I wanted to ask you this question because I actually don't think I'm in agreement with this gentleman behind me about the language. You remember I spoke to you about the language of luxury quite a number of years ago.
Yeah.
But I don't think your work is any more about luxury because you've actually shifted over all these years. You used to be in luxury branding, sort of talking to me about that as if it was a given, and I'd be like, what is this? And now you're talking about something else. So can you tell me what that something else is?
I don't know, you've just told me.
I want you to tell me. Do you think doing this work has changed?
It has changed me. Absolutely.
So tell me about
because that goes back to what Gemma was asking me, is that in the past it would have been, a pen that my father left me, or cufflinks that my mother gave me, or something, that I was gifted.
Yeah.
Those things don't really matter to me anymore.
So you're not as shallow anymore. No.
I'm not as shallow anymore. I'm not driven by going to
You really have changed over these years. To me, you've never so clearly to me articulated your actual concern for luxury as something that isn't a positive. In the same way. So obviously something's really good.
Well, it's because I think it goes back to what I was saying. It's I'm struck by the amount of stuff that people are buying. And I think it's having a detrimental effect on all of us, on our health, our well-being, on everything. And that's why I think that's become more of a realization, I suppose, over the past however many years. Yeah, because, also lots of, friends, some of them really engage in just consuming stuff. And consuming really expensive stuff. And I was thinking, it goes back to a conversation I had with Theo Fennell years ago, and we were talking about Van Cleef & Arpels and the Alhambra bracelet, and he said to me, it's the biggest load of rubbish. He said, all it is like 0.5 gram of gold with a bit of stamped out stone, but people are spending £5,000 on that bracelet. But they're not spending £5,000 on the bracelet. They're spending £5,000 on Van Cleef & Arpels. It's not like they're going in and buying a trompe d'oeil, whatever it is, kind of swingy tremblay brooch that's been made by a guy that who's made it, and that's why it's £5,000. So, yeah, or Fabergé, exactly. And not even the new Fabergé, because that's kind of nonsense. But yeah, I think it's really about, I've become much more probably attuned with the world in which we live. Hence the elephants, seeing cruelty and to whether it's animals or people, hamsters, exactly 2,400 hamsters. That's kind of changed the way I think about stuff and the way I think about people spending so much money on stuff that we don't need. And I'm just as guilty as many about buying stuff. And I keep saying to my mother, I don't need to buy stuff, and she said, but you always say that. But it's just I think we just have to be more responsible with our actions. So I think that's where that maybe comes from. Anyway, I think is that enough?